Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, your boy on social media at MMALOTN, and the architect behind the MMA Fight Archive, where we cover 17 different promotions from all over the world and have already accumulated close to 3,900 fighter profiles for you guys to browse through and research to ensure you leave no stone unturned when you're preparing for these upcoming MMA events, not just for the handicappers or the analysts or the predictors, but you also have been very helpful to commentators of some of these bigger promotions, not to mention coaches and fighters. And if you want to ensure that you're getting as many direct links to past fights as possible for all the competitors competing on these 17 different promotions from all over the world, you can check it out with a 7-day free trial. Link in the description below. Once again, that is the MMA Fight Archive. Make sure you guys give it a whirl, and especially if you do your own researching, I promise you it will save you a boatload of time so you don't have to scour the web for all that stuff. We have it on one page for your viewing and studying pleasure. All right, this is the final regular season event for the PFL. I believe it's welterweights and featherweights that are going to be on display this week, hoping to secure a playoff spot in hopes of securing that $1 million paycheck at the end of the season. A bunch of very fun and intriguing fights on this card, as you would expect, as well as some chalky spots as well. And I think there are some shaky, chalky spots which could potentially spring upsets for the underdogs. You guys can obviously decipher that as I go through the breakdowns here. Reminder, UFC breakdowns are already out on the YouTube page, so check that out. If you're looking for ACA 177 breakdowns, there's 19 fights currently scheduled for that card going down on Friday morning. I'll have write-ups for every single one of those matchups on the MMALOTN Patreon page, so check the link in the description below for that. All right. I like to get through these PFL breakdowns pretty briefly, pretty quickly. So without further ado, let's get right into this bad boy. First fight of the night, Tyler Diamond coming in at plus 140 going up against Brett Johns. Now, Tyler Diamond has some solid wins under his belt, especially that last one that he had over Otto Rodriguez, where he just gutted out a very close performance. I believe all 3 rounds were scored in his favor, but it seemed like there were certain parts where he was struggling a little bit. He was able to dictate the pace of that fight, which allowed him to really walk down Rodriguez in between the grappling attempts that we saw from Diamond, and he is largely a wrestler looking to dominate his opponents from that top position. He hasn't fought that often since COVID. I believe this is only going to be his 5th fight since late 2019, and I think it's a shame almost. I don't think he's as focused on mixed martial arts at this stage in his career, focused on, I believe he's a hunter as well, if I'm not mistaken. His opponent this weekend, Brett Johns, is now 3-2 since leaving the UFC. However, those 2 losses coming against high-level guys like Danny Sabatello and the currently undefeated Timur Khizriev, who was able to grind him out last time out back in April. That was a closer fight than the odds had initially indicated, as Johns was putting up a pretty good fight, landed a couple takedowns of his own, got the back of Timur Khizriev a few times, landed some good shots on the feet, but ultimately the relentless wrestling pace of Khizriev and the cardio of Khizriev allowed him to keep Johns in some compromising positions, forcing Johns to stay on the defensive for the majority of that fight. But in this matchup, even though Diamond might have a technical wrestling advantage early on in this matchup, I think the pace and consistent resistance that we're going to see from the Brett Johns side of things will start to wear on Tyler Diamond, and we'll see him start to wear down and break later on in this matchup, where Johns should be able to either cruise to a decision victory or end up finishing him in that 3rd round and picking up a big and much needed victory here. So again, Diamond is the better wrestler early, but I think Johns, with that continued resistance, working back to his feet, and then eventually pushing the pace and staying in Diamond's face, will cause Diamond to slow down, and Johns should ultimately get the victory here. I think inside the distance, roughly in that 3rd round. All right, next up, Don Madge coming in at minus 265, going up against Naaman Gracie, who comes in at plus 205. Striker versus grappler here. Although the striker has showcased a very aggressive BJJ and submission style at times, he would be better suited to try to go out there and strike against Naaman Gracie. I think Don Madge will be able to walk down Naaman pretty easily here, and Gracie has largely suffered from having a very poor wrestling game, which should allow Madge to keep this fight upright, really touch up Naaman Gracie, and probably finish him, I think, under a round and a half. I saw it roughly around -110, and by the time I started recording this podcast, it got bet down to +135. So I think we're actually going to see that close as an underdog. The total that is the under 1.5, and I think I'll be honing in on that spot here, as I do think that Madge has a significant striking advantage here, and I think he'll be able to put the pressure on Gracie here. And again, the PFL is very much rewarding fighters that are able to go out there and get quick finishes, and Madge already has a first round finish on his season run after he finished Brennan Ward back in April, and I think if he secures another quick first round victory here, this guy almost pretty much cements himself a spot in the playoffs, and I think he would be more than happy to try to do that here against a guy that he has a significant striking advantage over. He can't just go balls to the wall. Obviously, Gracie could change levels and get a unsuspecting takedown, but I think Madge will kind of weigh those options well here, slowly stalk him, eventually break him, and then find that finish, and I think it comes relatively quickly here. So give me Madge and Madge by KO. Next up, Kamaka coming in at -350, going up against Pedro Carvalho, who comes in at +275. Now, last time around, Kamaka was able to go out there and earn a victory over Bubba Jenkins in a fight where he showcased solid takedown defense, good get-ups, and then obviously outweighing the control of Jenkins by outdamaging him on the feet, outstriking him, showcasing he was the better striker that night. The thing with Kamaka is it's very weird. He has 13 professional victories. Only 2 of them have come by finish. He largely relies on his striking approach, throwing in combinations and volume, walking his opponents down, managing his distance well, and then countering effectively. But he usually wins some of his fights by the thinnest of margins, which is why it's hard for me to really justify a -350 shot in this spot. I'm not the biggest Pedro Carvalho fan. I try to, more often now, try to fade this guy, and it's bitten me in the ass, especially when he went up against, I believe it was Mads Burnell. But I think that this is a fight that Kamaka can win, can dictate the pace of, but Carvalho can make it very close considering some of the grappling attempts that we should see from the Pedro Carvalho side, but also the output and volume that we'll see from the Carvalho side as well. So what I like most is actually the over 2.5 in this spot, given the lack of finishing ability from Kamaka. And the last time I saw the over 2.5, it was at -150. I think that's a damn good line in a fight that should be somewhat competitive in the striking realm. I will still lean Kamaka as the victor in the spot, but the over 2.5, if it stays at that -150 range, I think it's a better shot than taking the -350 on Kamaka. Again, Carvalho could have some success. He has some decent striking and volume in his own right, and again, Kamaka doesn't often hurt his opponent so badly that he drops them every single time out, and that causes him some issues in terms of fighting very close against some of his opponents. I thought he lost a Henry Corrales fight a couple fights back. It is what it is. He ends up getting his hand raised, and he can end up doing the same thing here, but -350 is unjustifiable in my opinion. Next up, Yamauchi coming in at +110, going up against Andrei Koreshkov, who comes in at -130. Now, both these guys were Bellator lifers, and obviously Koreshkov was able to get to the pinnacle of Bellator by earning the Bellator welterweight championship, and I believe he defended it a few times, whereas Yamauchi has kind of been struggling in terms of trying to figure out which weight class he should be fighting at. Now he's settling in at 170 pounds, and he showcased a very good performance against Naaman Gracie last time around, outstriking him and stopping the grapple-heavy approach that we were expecting from Gracie. Yamauchi has a significant amount of submissions on his record. I was unable to, put those numbers together before hitting record here, but he was known for his submissions in Bellator, but he is also a very nasty striker with that karate-like stance that he likes to use, bouncing on the balls of his feet, darting in and out of the pocket, landing good shots down the pipe, has some sting on his shots as well, so he could absolutely be competitive against Koreshkov in the striking realm here, even though Koreshkov's striking mainly consists of a lot of spinning back kicks, all to eventually set up that takedown. Now, Koreshkov could land some takedowns here, or he should land some takedowns in the spot, but I think the active guard of Yamauchi will provide enough resistance to allow him to keep Koreshkov busy, keeping Koreshkov from landing too much damaging blows from that top position, and that could either set up submission opportunities or get-ups for Yamauchi, where he should be able to get some of that control time nullified by landing damage of his own and being the superior striker here. So as the slight underdog in the spot, I'm going to lean with Yamauchi, as I think he goes out there, out damages Koreshkov, and wins this fight on the scorecards. Next up, Timur Khizriev -600 going up against Enrique Barzola, who comes in at +425. Now, Khizriev undefeated, coming off that victory over Brett Johns, has looked quite dominant throughout his run, although I do believe that some of the close fights that he's had will come back to eventually haunt him. as he takes steps up in competition and as he starts facing different stylistic matchups and puzzles. Last time against Brett Johns, he landed good opportunistic takedowns, getting some good control time, landing some decent damage. But we saw, obviously, Brett Johns have his own success with a few takedowns and some good control time of his own. It was very surprising to see Khizriev have such a close fight against a fighter like Richie Smolin as well, especially as a significantly big underdog or favorite in that fight that he was. I was surprised that Smolin was able to have as much success as he had, but Khizriev still managed to keep his undefeated record in tow at that time. His striking is not that bad either, but I think he is best when he can get his grappling going. Now, Barzola, relentless grappler, high pressure, high pace, very good cardio as well. The losses that he's had recently are very close fights. Magomedov, Juan Archuleta, the Adam Borics fight, had he not gotten dropped in that second round by that big punch from Borics, he probably goes on to end up winning that fight by decision. Very close fight. Every time he ends up losing, close fight. Again, he just puts on a lot of pressure, looks to grapple his opponents, take them to the ground, and smother them from that top position. So I'm a little bit hesitant in terms of being like, all right, Khizriev, that's a free square essentially. But Barzola could absolutely make this a competitive fight. He doesn't settle for bad positions, and Khizriev will be the better wrestler here without a doubt. I'm picking him to win, but Barzola at plus 425 is just way too wide in the spot. I know a lot of you don't want to hear that. You guys just want that free parlay square to go out there, but if you do end up parlaying Khizriev and he ends up shitting the bed in this spot, you only have yourself to blame at the end of the day. I might put maybe even a quarter unit on Barzola in this spot because he could make things competitive, but I just can't get over the fact that Khizriev will likely be the better technical wrestler here and should be able to secure enough top pressure and be the cleaner striker to end up landing more damage in this spot. But again, this should be closer to like Khizriev minus 230, minus 240, not minus 600. That doesn't make any sense to me here. So if you're a value guy, again, value, the main word that a lot of people leave out when we're talking about value is that it's essentially perceived value. What I perceive is that there is value on the Barzola side, hence why I'm considering a small shot on him at that plus 425 line. That may not be your perceived value. You might see value on Khizriev at minus 600 and still be happy even if this fight ends up playing closely and he ends up winning on the scorecards. But again, those spots will eventually come back to bite you in the ass. But I do think Khizriev wins here, and I think he wins on the scorecards. All right, probably the fight that I'm looking forward to most on this entire card, a very competitive Murad Ramazanov coming in at minus 135, going up against Shamil Musaev coming in at plus 115. Now, Ramazanov is 12-0 and had a dominant first-round submission victory over Laureano Staropoli in his PFL debut back in April. This man is an absolute ape in terms of getting opponents to the ground and smothering them from that top position. He seems to have the cardio to do it for 15 minutes if he needs to as well, but it's just as sheer power and strength in terms of getting these guys to the ground and just controlling them there. He was unable to secure a finish over the last 4 years leading up to this matchup against Staropoli, but he made quick work of Staropoli once this fight hit the mat. But what was interesting in terms of how he got that grappling going, we saw Staropoli throw a flying knee. He latched onto the knee, converted it or chained it to a body lock, eventually got this fight to the ground and started smothering Staropoli, opening up that back, getting that rear naked choke. Even when he shoots on his opponents from in the open cage, and his opponents are able to get that underhook even before he's able to complete the takedown, we see Ramazanov just drive and power through these takedown attempts to still complete these takedowns when, technically speaking, the guys are doing a good job in terms of trying to stop it. He's just so powerful, strong, and explosive that he's able to stop these takedowns and make it very difficult for his opponents. This guy is an absolute beast in terms of grappling and will do a great job in terms of holding most of his opponents down and eventually opening up finishing opportunities. And he's only 28 years old. Absolutely crazy. Now he's going up against Shamil Musaev, who burst onto the scene with an upset victory over Logan Storley last time around, where he was able to stop the few takedowns that were coming his way and eventually piece him up on the feet with his flashy striking and eventually put him away early in that second round. Now he came into that fight with Storley as a plus 185 underdog, and I saw on tape that this guy has poor takedown defense, and there are times where he can be held down, but his ability to finish opponents have always kept him in fights and able to beat some of the guys that he was facing facing on the regional scene. I think his first 10 fighters that he fought were complete tomato cans, but the rest of the fights that he had, solid competition, so it was respectable of the record that he was able to put together before coming over to the PFL. But he's in for some shit here against Ramazanov, in my opinion. Now, obviously, Musaev will have a striking advantage in this spot, so I understand why the odds are as close as they are. But when Ramazanov eventually gets a hold of him and starts dragging him to the ground and wearing on him, I think we'll see that power, pop, and explosiveness from Musaev start to slow down, making it harder for him to really get that big shot off on Ramazanov. Again, a lot of that flashy striking that we see from Musaev is going to work against him here, which will open up takedown opportunities for Ramazanov. Musaev, if he looks to turn and throw a spinning back kick or something like that, Ramazanov is going to catch that kick and then chain it into a body lock of some sort and then slowly start working for that takedown. This guy is very dangerous in the grappling realm, and I think people will find that firsthand here. And to get him at minus 135, I think is a steal in this spot. So I'm going to go Ramazanov. Ramazanov by decision. Although I won't count out a finish, I'm going to go by decision. All right, next up, Larkin returns to the cage, coming in at minus 275, going up against promotional newcomer Dominguez, who comes in at plus 215. Now, Larkin, we know what he's all about. Muay Thai specialist, nasty knees, nasty elbows, nasty leg kicks. Last time around, he came up short against Andrei Koreshkov, who was able to ground him out long enough to get that split decision victory. Very close fight, damage versus control. Seems like that night it was damage the control is what the judges were leaning on more often. But Larkin has shown takedown defense improvements, get-up improvements as well, which makes him so dangerous in the striking realm. He will be 38 in September, so you wonder when those skills will start to slow down. He starts to show a regression in terms of his skill set. But he goes up against a guy in Dominguez here who he should have a solid striking advantage over to pretty much piece up and put away. Dominguez comes from the Lux Fight League, the Mexican promotion, if I'm not mistaken, as the welterweight champion, defeating former PFL fighter Naib Lopez in his last matchup. That was avenging a loss that he had to Lopez earlier in his career. Grinded him out over 25 minutes, utilizing a grapple-heavy approach, and won that fight pretty easily. There were some sticky spots that he was able to get out of, but then from there he was able to cruise to a decision victory. Larkin should have good enough takedown defense and get-ups to stop whatever Dominguez is going to be throwing at him grappling-wise. And I think Larkin has a large enough striking advantage in this matchup to really hurt Dominguez repeatedly throughout this fight and eventually put him away. Does that happen under 1.5 rounds, which is what the total is set at? I'm not 100% sure. There could be some time on the clock eaten up here with Dominguez looking to get the takedown going, get some clinch going, eating some seconds and minutes off the clock. But I still lean on the Larkin side to go out there and get that knockout victory, probably in the second or third round. All right, next up, Gabriel Alves Braga coming in at minus 195, going up against Bubba Jenkins, who comes in at plus 170. Now, last time around, Gabriel Alves Braga went up against Justin Gonzales, and Gonzales did a decent job in terms of keeping him up against the cage, having some good dirty boxing, some good knees to the thigh. But once Braga was able to get that distance that he needed, he landed a perfect counter with 1 second left on the clock, ultimately putting Gonzales down and out, winning that fight. And it was a very emotional victory for Braga, as it was his first fight without his father. Now, his father pretty much was his head coach through the entirety of his career, and his father was brutally murdered by some gang members a couple months prior to this matchup, which is why you saw Braga pretty much drop to tears and crumble after that victory, just in the memory of his father. This kid is very talented. I thought he was a dark horse in last year's PFL tournament, made it all the way to the finals. He ended up coming up short against a guy that he had already defeated, but the fact that he made it to the finals goes to show that this kid is somebody that we really need to take seriously. He's a nasty striker, loves to target the calf of his opponents, brutalizing them there and then opening up with his hands afterwards. But he also has a reliable wrestling game that he can lean on if he has the advantage against his opponent in that matchup. Good jiu-jitsu, very active off of his back, creates scrambles, reversals, works back to his feet, and then gets back to his striking prowess, which is probably the strongest part of his game. Bubba Jenkins came up short last time around, making it 2 straight now. Last time he ended up losing to Kamaka, who he was unable to substantially create damage from that dominant position he was able to accrue and pretty much hold his opponents down, something that he's been successful with in the past. And he struggled to do that against Gabriel Alves Braga, against Kai Kamaka, which led to him getting out damaged, outstruck, and pretty much brutalized over the course of that matchup. Jenkins could have some wrestling success and some control against Braga, but I think Braga usually showcases enough resistance in terms of the defensive grappling so that he can eventually get this fight back into the feet, into the striking realm, and that's where I believe he'll be able to really hurt the lead leg of Bubba Jenkins, getting back to his kicking game, and I think that's going to cause Jenkins a ton of problems here, and that will open up the striking opportunities for Braga, and I think he'll eventually find that knockout victory over Jenkins here. Minus 200 kind of gets me a little queasy a little bit because Jenkins could make things interesting with his wrestling and his control, but I believe enough in Braga's ability to work back to his feet or stop the majority of takedowns that are coming his way and then get back to a striking advantage. I'm going to go Braga and Braga inside the distance. All right. Next up, we got Magomed Umalatov coming in at minus 1,500, going up against Brennan Ward, who comes in at plus 850. Umalatov picked up the biggest victory of his MMA career last time around as he defeated veteran Andrei Koreshkov on the scorecards, pretty much winning every minute of that matchup with his grappling, with his striking advantage. The kid looked like the goods. Had it not been for a couple of injuries or visa issues that he struggled with in the past, he probably already would have been a PFL champion. There is a reason he is 14 or 15-0 at this point in his career. This kid is special. He's probably the best welterweight on the roster, and I think we end up seeing him take it all the way. Unfortunately for Brennan Ward, he's going to have to try to overcome a minus 1,500 favorite here, looking to try to knock out Umalatov early or end up getting finished himself. I expect Umalatov to pretty much run through Ward. Ward is dangerous with that big power that he has, but I expect the veterancy and experience of Umalatov at this stage of his career to really wear on Ward and eventually open up a finish of his own. And I think it comes pretty early as well, as Ward is that kind of guy. He never usually goes over that 1.5 round mark, and I think we'll see Umalatov put him away. I would love to see Umalatov versus Ramazanov, and I think that's a fight that could potentially be put together if both guys continue their winning ways. All right, next up, I believe this is the co-main event where we got Logan Storley coming in at minus 280, going up against Luka Poclit, who comes in at plus 220. Storley pretty much laid an egg last time around against Shamil Musaev as he gave up on his takedown heavy approach early on in that matchup. And to me, he didn't look in good shape as he's looked in the past, and he may have overlooked this PFL tournament, thinking that he could just go out there and out wrestle these guys. But that was a harsh wake-up call for him last time around as Musaev put him out clean in that second round. Storley will always struggle in terms of being a effective striker, so he's going to have to lean on his wrestling to go out there and grind these guys out. The only time where we've seen him have significant striking success was when he went up against Naaman Gracie, utilizing his wrestling defensively so that he can keep the fight on the feet and really touch up Gracie over the course of 25 minutes. In this matchup against Luka Poclit, he may look to do the same thing, as Poclit is very dangerous with his jiu-jitsu approach. Poclit is riding a 10-fight winning streak with 7 of his 10 victories coming by finish, 6 of them coming by submission. This guy is very good in terms of searching for the neck of his opponents and coming up with weird submissions to try to put them out and put them away. And all he needs is just one little entry into a takedown, just as we saw against Roman Feraldo, where he can get that grappling going and eventually set up a choke from pretty much any position that he can. I think Storley is good enough defensively speaking here to keep this fight in the striking realm, and then from there he should have a small striking advantage to go out there and outstrike Poclit. But again, minus 280 is too wide for a guy in Poclit who's just as dangerous with his grappling as Storley is, and I think Poclit might be even more dangerous with his grappling, especially if they're able to get this to the ground and he can get his BJJ going. Storley is the better wrestler, Poclit better BJJ specialist, but I think we'll see good enough defensive grappling here from Storley to keep this in a position where he feels most comfortable. But still, minus 280, I don't like that. All right, main event here, intriguing matchup. Even though we have Brendan Loughnane coming in at minus 500, he's going up against a very game and live underdog in Justin Gonzales, who comes in at plus 375. Now, Brendan Loughnane last time around was unable to use his calf kicking approach against Pedro Carvalho, who did a great job in terms of utilizing movement and stance switches to often mirror Brendan Loughnane. So Loughnane struggled to get those calf kicks off, but eventually opened up with his punches and landed that big shot on Carvalho. Now, I believe that was a bit of a quick stoppage. I think you could have given Carvalho a little bit more rope, considering how that fight ended up going down. But I still think that Loughnane would have gone on to win that matchup. Loughnane is a guy that significantly improved his takedown defense to the point that he ended up winning the 2022 season. In 2023, he ended up getting upset by Jesus Pinedo, ended up missing the playoffs, and now he's coming back with a fire lit under him once again to try to claim the status that he had in 2022. We know what the best part of his game is. It's that calf kicking so that he can keep his opponents debilitated, slow them down, and then open up with his strikes afterwards, just as he's done against countless opponents in the past. But he's going up against a guy in Justin Gonzales who showcased a pretty good striking game of his own against Gabriel Alves Braga, specifically with his ability to stop the calf kicks that were coming from Braga, who also likes his calf kicking style. We saw Gonzales, similar to Carvalho, utilize a lot of switch stances, a lot of movement, pretty much moving in the direction that we would see the kicks from Braga coming so that he didn't get landed on too heavily. And then he would try to crash the pocket with some of his grappling, some of his striking, good output. This kid's a good fighter. You know, the losses that he has on his record are to legitimate opponents. And I think that one brain fart that he had against Braga is something that he could easily remedy and possibly be successful with moving forward. Now, I do think Loughnane is still the slicker and better striker overall. I don't think the wrestling background of Gonzales is going to have too much of a bearing on this fight. I think it will allow him to kind of change up the levels on Loughnane and give him different looks throughout this matchup. But this fight will play out closer than minus 500 indicates, in my opinion. I believe if Loughnane is unable to get his calf kicking game going, he probably does not look as dominant as he has in fights where he has implemented his calf kicking game. So seeing Gonzalez's success in terms of shutting down Braga's calf kicking game, if he's able to implement that here, mix up the levels, land some good punches of his own, he can make this a very competitive matchup. Again, I think Loughnane is still the better striker, but similar to the Timur Khizriev fight, similar to the Kai Kamaka fight, if we're talking about percentages, this is a closer fight than, I believe, what if that 85% indicates on Loughnane. I know 80% is 400. I have to do the math off the top of my head. Not doing that. But again, it would be over 80% of the time that you see Loughnane defeating Gonzales. Again, if Gonzales shuts down the calf kicking game, this is much closer than minus 500 for Loughnane. So prediction is still going to be Loughnane, but this will play out closer than that fight, and I might have to sprinkle a little bit on Gonzales just for odds sake in this matchup. So, not a lot of underdogs I'm picking on this card overall. I think outright the only underdog that I ended up picking was Gaiotti Yamauchi. There are some totals that are at plus money that I think are worth taking a shot on as well. But in terms of the underdogs that I did not pick as an official prediction that I believe are live, are going to be Justin Gonzales, Luka Poclit, just going through here, Enrique Barzola, Pedro Carvalho. Yeah, those are the four underdogs outside of Gaiotti Yamauchi that I believe are live, even though I'm picking against them in this spot. All right, there you guys go. PFL 6 breakdowns for you guys. Again, ACA goes down Friday morning. I'll have written breakdowns strictly on the Lock of the Night Patreon page. Check the link in the description below. Otherwise, I'll see you guys again tomorrow for the top 3 Dog of the Night candidates that I have for the UFC 303 card. I'll see you guys then. Peace.
Last thing.